Again, I've been talking about the intersection of righteousness, faith, Abraham, and you because his story is your story. Romans 4 says the words, "it was credited to him," were written not only for Abraham, but also for us, or for you, to whom righteousness will be credited. So the Bible ties you to Abraham's faith journey, not to David's, not to Joseph's or Esther's or Samson's or to any other faith hero. You have a unique calling and ministry which might reflect any one of those characters in the Bible, but your faith journey is Abraham's because Abraham is a father of all who believe. So it's imperative that you understand the path the Lord took Abraham on, or you will misinterpret life and give up on your life as he takes you on the same journey. His story, Abraham's story, was specifically not about doing. It was about becoming and being. Too often you and I get tripped up over what should I do? And sometimes ministers don't really help with that much. While doing is a part, it's often a whipping boy because you can never do enough, nor do it correctly, and you will never find satisfaction in your doing, as Ecclesiastes says. But your end is to be the same as his, unimaginable significance. So shall your seed be, with blessing blessed, with increase increased, nothing withheld. But to be able to receive this without adversely affecting you, you need to go through the process. Abraham had a pretty unremarkable life, sort of like most of us, except for a couple of shining moments. His life consisted of a few encounters with God and living his life quietly with his wife and friends as he tried to figure it all out. And Abraham was clueless, like I said, as clueless as you and I were. He would have died in Haran, a pagan, if God hadn't revealed himself to him. And also, as soon as Abraham encountered God and heard that he was to leave, he did what we all do. He imperfectly obeyed God. He was told to leave all of his relatives, including his dad, but he let his dad take the lead. And that should be strangely comforting. When his dad finally died in Haran, God again said, "Leave all," and he took Lot and again imperfectly obeyed. But all this time, while he did believe God, he didn't believe who God said that he, Abraham, was. And if God hadn't provoked him in Genesis 15, he would have remained like most of us, serving God, loving God, believing God, but unaware of who he was. You and I tend to be good with the first, but not so good with the second. For at least 10 years after Abraham first encountered God and followed, he was declared righteous. It was after 10 years he was declared righteous. His becoming right, it seems, was as much about believing and becoming the person God imagined as it was believing in a God he could never have imagined. And this is a faith stage that we've talked about, where God tells you and tells you and tells you that you are his beloved, and you finally say yes. Initially, there's usually not a lot of specificity, but believing finally that you are his beloved and he's thrilled about you is a great beginning. And I think it is time for you to say yes to this. This little post might be your Genesis 15 moment. But once you believe, you enter the next stage where what you believe and what you experience does not sync up. You're faced with your inability to produce it, all your feelings, and also the circumstances which seem to tell you no. And this is the hope stage. And just like God had to step in during the faith stage for Abraham, he needed to do that here as well. You see, Abraham now knew what God had purposed for his life, and he still had a little life in him, if you know what I mean. So he did what he could to become what God wanted. And this is a common theme throughout the Bible, whether it's Jacob who wanted God's blessing and then decided to steal it, or Moses who knew that he was to deliver Israel and decided to do it one Egyptian at a time. Each one of these, and Abraham as well, had the ability for a while to accomplish God's will in his own strength. But when he was 99 years old, God appeared to Abraham and said, "Good news, Abram. I'm now going to fulfill my promise to you. You will be a father." Can you imagine Abraham's befuddlement? "But I am a father. I succeeded in doing what you called me to do. Look, here's Ishmael." And I want to talk to you about what God did at this point, which was to change Abraham's name, or Abram's name, to Abraham. But I first need to talk about failure. Every person who God is going to use will fail big time. And I'm not talking about moral failure. God help us all here. There's no excuse for moral failure. But the failure I am talking about is you who really want to please God, doing in your own strength what God has purposed to do in His. The only way for you to discover that you blew it, though, is for God to show you how bankrupt you are, for things to blow up in your face. You and I, like Abraham, are clueless as to how God achieves His purpose in our lives. Abraham really thought that impregnating Sarah's maid was the way of achieving God's will. But God showed him he was an abject failure, and what he did actually hindered the work of God. But the good news is, again, God wasn't that worked up about it, because He knows that the only way to become fruitful is to mess up your life. No one gets there by skipping through the daisies. No, you must go through deep failure. And sometimes that failure seems almost unrecoverable. If you're serious about God and you don't know this, you're going to end up throwing in the towel and walk away, or worse. The problem is your natural abilities get in the way. Abraham, again, still had the ability to become a father. And the more gifted you think you are, the more God needs to show you how empty you really are and how ineffective your gifts are. I have a friend who used to call me Too Much Tom. While knowing that he was using that as a compliment, it sadly was all too true. And that's the problem. Too much Tom. Too much you. Next time, I'm going to interweave the story of Too Much Tom with the story of Too Much Saul or Paul. We have sanitized this person, Paul. We think that he came out of the proverbial Christian womb as a perfect apostle and perfect saint. No, he was an SOB before he encountered the Lord, and he was an SOB afterwards, only a Christian one. What you and I do to protect yourself and to control your world before you encounter Christ are the same things you do afterwards. They just pass through the new birth process unscathed. But in the hope stage, God steps in and does what we can't do, which is change us. So till next time.